I rarely walk into a room where I feel like I'm not gonna walk out, you know, with all my experience. So I think I'm able to confidently walk into a room or a situation or wherever and be like, if I'm leaving this earth, I'm gonna take some bodies with me.
Just if you trained, you have something about you, like where your head's up, right? You're confident.
Yes.
And then people could fucking see that or can smell that from miles away.
Like people who are successful in life, everyone around them only sees their success, but only the close people see their hard work to that success, right?
It's within your mind. It's within your power to like reframe a situation. You can be like, well, what lesson can I take out of this? Because it already happened, man. You know, some circumstances just aren't in your control.
People want to be the best that they are at what they already know how to do. But
Because they're comfortable, right?
Right, because you're comfortable, right? Because it's less effort.
Yeah,
you know. But
exactly.
it's like, oh, I already invested so much time and effort on learning this over here. Like, why do I want to start over? Well, it's like, because that's how you get better.
There's this world-class physicist. His name's Robert Feynman. He quotes, "If you want to master something, teach it."
Your own success and your ability to grow in your games is your responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, you should be, humble enough, disciplined enough to understand that, like, I can't learn everything all at once.
So I'm very interested in, when I have people on here, I'm very interested in what fuels them, because this is a self-improvement podcast to do what they do. And before the podcast, we were talking about a little bit of like how you grew up. And, you told me that you went to wrestling in high school to kind of put that energy somewhere else. Can you talk about what made you do that? Like we were talking about, your parents and, how they weren't really there. So how much did that have an effect on what you do now or what you did back then to get you into like grappling and wrestling?
Sure, absolutely, Chris. Well, first of all, thank you, man, for having me on here.
Absolutely. My pleasure, man. Thank you.
This is the first experience for me, so I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Pleasure
to have you, man.
Diving into my background a little bit, yeah. So I, moved to Las Vegas back in '01, and then my parents had just split up. So my father lives in a different state. My mom moved to Vegas. Everything was new to me. I got into skateboarding, and I was finding myself getting in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So then,
like all of us, right?
by then, I'm making it to high school, and I wanted to get strong. And so I was like, oh, it sounds good. Wrestling, lifting people up, probably get strong that way.
Yeah.
And
what made you think of that? Like, why is it that popped up like wrestling out of all the sports, right?
You know
Football.
what? Like, I had done some like sparring here and there with like karate and like, some boxing early on. And I was like, I kind of like the combat, but just for, finances and moving into a new town and all that, that was really hard to maintain. Because I was just living with my mom. She was working 1-2 jobs, it was really hard. And then I had a younger sister too, so it was just very challenging to financially support all that. So if I could go to a school and they could provide an activity, then it was free, to stay out of trouble. And that's how I got into wrestling. Yeah,
man. I mean, I wanted to talk about that because far too often that kids don't have an avenue. Mm-hmm. And it's great that you found it because, right, like we see it all the time, how they fall into drugs at that early age because they don't know. Like they don't know. We don't know any better. We're trying to find like our social group, and then we're trying to find where we belong. But that's awesome that you found something that you could put all your energy in, and then make like an identity of yourself. Because I think that's what happened, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, so like I said, I was skateboarding, and I was like all into it. That was like my passion at the time. And then as I transitioned to high school, a lot of my friends that I went to middle school with, we kind of parted ways depending on what high schools we went to. So the fact that I was going into wrestling just gave me something else to look forward to. I was also into music, so I started doing band, wrestling, got into swimming, soccer. Like I was just nonstop after that. But I immediately fell in love with wrestling. I thought it was an amazing sport, and I did not realize how tough of a sport it is. But the lessons that I learned from that and the person I became, I think mentally definitely helped me drive to my military career for a short period of time. And now, it's helped me drive to the medical career and as a father, and as a spouse, as a husband, as everything. Like it's just made me the best version of myself. And I've always strived for that.
Yeah, for sure. Everything's pretty much interconnected, right? Like, with jiu-jitsu, we learn all these lessons on the mat and then we apply it to I can only speak for jiu-jitsu because I never wrestled.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
holy shit, like wrestling, I've got enough information. Number one, it's funny you say like, you went to wrestling and you liked it or loved it or whatever, because a lot of people now at our gym, right? Won't say any names, but we fucking hate wrestling. It's so fucking hard, dude.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the hardest things, right?
Sure.
Joe Rogan says it. He had this bit where it's like, dude, you're carrying people. Like even the warm-ups, man.
Yeah.
Even like just going down and doing the double leg warm-ups. It's like, what the fuck is this? There's so much resistance in that kind of grappling that oh man, like because I've done MMA training and it's like, oh God, that's the worst.
Yeah.
Personally, that's the worst part. Full transparency. It's like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
this is like very, very tiring.
And I've done a few classes. I've sparred here and there, and I used to prepare for smoker fights back in the day, just for shits and giggles, And man, I'm telling you that I was in pretty good shape and at the time, and I was like, yeah, this is fine, whatever, no big deal. But like, I'm a full blown wrestling practice. It's just absolutely grueling from start to finish.
God.
And
Think about it.
I give it up to a lot of the youth kids that are starting at a young age and getting into this and just building the right mindset. And there's a few group programs out here in town. My boy's in one of them, and man, it's amazing to watch. And you can see the potential for every single one of those kids if they stay in the right track and like how amazing their career could potentially be.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a thought about that. Like, when people start young and they get into like mixed martial arts really young and wrestling as well. Interestingly enough, it's the best time for a kid because they just kind of do things, right? Like kids just do things without like almost a purpose.
Yeah.
They kind of get thrown in there and then their parents like kind of you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you got those parents that are like want them to get like to be a collegiate athlete like in football. So they'll carry on, but the kid's just kind of riding the wave. He's like, all right, fuck it. Like, let's just do wrestling. Let's just do MMA, whatever.
Yeah,
and then they kind of end up liking it. They build that, like I said, that strong community, and then they just kind of ride the wave. So it's not like, it's almost as if they didn't choose it. It's just they fell in love with the training, and then, all these endorphins are coming out, and they're like, yeah, fuck yeah, I met a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, as far as wrestling goes, like I think wrestling is an amazing sport that you should really direct your children to go to, or even yourself, honestly, just to know where you stand in life and like get a little taste of what it feels to be miserable for a couple hours. But as far as jiu-jitsu goes, man, I preach it to every single person that I ever meet. I encourage it to all females. I encourage it to all males, young children as well, for self-defense reasons only, truly. Just know enough to get up and run away, especially in today's world. If you don't want to compete and you don't want to be a world champ, like you don't have to be, but just know enough to keep yourself safe,
Yeah, no, I 100% agreed. I think a part of what you're talking about is self-awareness too, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's more like intellect and knowing like, oh, your environment. And again, I always say this on the podcast, but then, we never want to condone violence. And I think for the most part, if you train, that, right? You're kind of like, well, fuck, you've seen some shit where another person's like better than you, right? Like, and then you take your energy all out on the mats and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it's the self-awareness also. Here's the interesting part of what we were talking about, how we were talking about you as like, your presence, right?
Right.
It's like, I know that you're in like the military, like it's off the cuff, like, cause I used to live in San Diego.
Sure.
And you military guys just have this thing, right? Like this demeanor about
vibe,
it.
yeah.
It's a vibe for sure.
Sure.
Like I'm friends with a lot of them. I train a lot of them in Muay Thai. And you guys have the same thing, which as of right now, I can't really explain. Maybe it's like the discipline, which is like very abstract. Like I can't explain it,
Sure.
but it's that, it's just that demeanor when you like walk in, right? It's just kind of, so anyway, my point is that self-awareness aspect of like martial arts.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, oh, maybe we shouldn't go that route, right? Or maybe this isn't a good place to be, and then we'll kind of separate ourselves from like those dumbasses that are drunk and shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's just more of that like that gut feeling that you're having. It's like, oh man, something's off. Something don't feel right. Hairs on the back of your neck are tingling. Your spidey sense, and you're like, I should probably get out of here.
Right.
And then absolutely, I agree with you.
And what's funny about that too is that this isn't just through martial arts, but people that do sports and they're pretty sure about themselves, not in a bad way. Like you said, it's a vibe, right? You can, I talked about this with Chino on the last podcast, but just if you trained, you have something about you, like where your head's up, right? You're confident.
Yes.
And then people could fucking see that or can smell that from miles
Sure.
away. When you walk into a room and it's not like you're like, yeah, I'm the shit. And then you're walking like, that Conor McGregor walk. You're
Right.
just kind of walking in there. You're minding your own business. You're kind of like, you're sure of yourself, and people could see that. People could read that off the cuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this just ties into what you were saying about like, when I give off that military vibe, is I've been through so much crap in my military career aspect and like been training for almost 12 years now in jiu-jitsu plus wrestling and judo. And so like I rarely walk into a room where I feel like I'm not going to walk out, with all my experience. So I think I'm able to confidently walk into a room or a situation or wherever and be like, if I'm leaving this earth, I'm going to take some bodies with me, So it's one of those things, but yeah, absolutely. I totally get it. And we just have this ingrained nature of like assessing every single individual now after a certain point where you're just like, in the event that this person decides to turn on me, like I have to assess their room, the situation, and know what my capabilities are. Because at the end of the day, their confidence builds of what you can do. If I don't know how to do anything, then I'm just gonna leave.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a shitty, kind of piggybacking on that. It's a shitty feeling to have.
Absolutely.
Where you're just kind of like, okay, well, you're not really in danger, but then you have that anxiety because you don't know, like, you don't have the confidence in yourself, right?
Sure.
Like, that's not to say that you're gonna like looking to fuck someone up. It's just to have that confidence to be in a room and just socialize with people because you are confident because of what you do, whether it's lifting, working out, play sports. It goes a long way. It's just like with your interactions with people, even if it's not one of those things where you can even defend yourself, just the internal confidence that you have, again, relating to that, right? Like just being social and stuff like that. The internal confidence you have is just a game changer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Having self-confidence and knowing what you're capable of doing is very different than ego and pride.
Yeah,
because I can't tell you how many times people have came in through the gym, just to pop in and they're bodybuilders or they're CrossFitters or,
that's so cliche nowadays,
whatever they are, like whatever their background is. If you're new to grappling as an entity, then you're just going to get humbled in all the right ways. I mean, even myself, when I stepped into jiu-jitsu, that just little world right there, having my wrestling background, having the hand-to-hand combat from the military, I was like, yeah, man, I can at least hang, and I was proven very wrong.
Yeah.
And it was very eye-opening. And I think that's what kind of ultimately drove me to really learn the aspects of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, it's funny you say that because you know how you're like strong and then you did wrestling, right? But here's the kicker. When you learn more jiu-jitsu, that plays into it, right? It's almost like, we don't know shit at first, but then when you start training, you've been training for like, when you get consistent, then say you've been training for like 2 years, that's when your wrestling comes into play because you know how to like implement it in that jiu-jitsu game.
Yes.
Which is like, even with like basketball and football and stuff, just like the sidestepping. Because some people are just not coordinated. Like I hate to say it, but it's like they have 2 left feet.
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey man, it's like it's harder for them to get. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're learning. But then that athleticism from your background sports that you did in high school or wrestling or whatever, it plays a long way, which is like, oh man, it plays a long way.
Yeah. Like if you've ever had the chance to train with me, I make it as enjoyable as possible. And I drop jokes all the time, not a demeaning joke, but like actual reality. I say people like, oh, I get compliments on my ability to like have good leg dexterity and good hip movement. It's like, dude, I used to salsa dance. Like, like literally, like I would go out every week and go salsa dancing. Yeah. So it's like, that's where my like footwork comes from. You know what I mean? Like it's like the simplest thing, but it's taking every lesson in life and learning how to apply it to something else. So like every job that I've ever had, and I've had like 10, 12 different jobs in my life, I've tried to be positive about it and be like, I'm going to learn something here that it's translatable, right? And I'd say that's probably one of the biggest things I learned in the military is your ability to adapt and like assess and being able to take those lessons and transform them over to something that is relatable. And that's that's pretty much how I tied my jiu-jitsu as well, like all through like my learning process.
Sure. People reframing that's golden advice, because a lot of people don't learn that sometimes in their lifetime or in their later like ages. But what I mean is that reframing is everything, right? Like even if you weren't in the military, but then if you can, like if you have a bad day or if something happens to you, you can, it's within your mind, it's within your power to like reframe a situation. You can be like, well, what lesson can I take out of this, because it already happened, man. You know, some circumstances just aren't in your control. And then it baffles me. I mean, not really, because I used to be like that, like when I was younger, right? I'm like, fuck, man, why'd this happen? but now it's almost like, okay, well, it happened. I mean, there was nothing I could do about it. What can you learn about it? And then hence you were talking about adaptation, right?
Your ability to adapt to anything is probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned in life.
It's everything,
and then the resiliency that it comes from grappling, from wrestling, from contact sports like that, from any sport really. As long as you're dedicated and disciplined, like you're gonna have struggles, you're gonna have adversities, and why not translate the same things, same logic and concept over to real life and apply it to your life so that you can continue to push through the struggles,
Absolutely, man. Yeah. And that's again, that implements into like your military background, right? That's why you have that demeanor, because you kind of you walk that life, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
You can't fake it.
Not at all.
Yeah. So I want to get early on. I know we're only 15 minutes in, but this is like the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about. So you've been doing jiu-jitsu for 12 years.
Yes.
And yeah, you and Jerry all, you guys came up in Cobra Kai, correct? Or you went to Cobra Kai?
So my story is a little bit different than Shane and Jerry.
Dave and
Shane and Jerry, Dave, and all of them. So I started my grappling journey right before I got out of the military. I'd say probably about like 4 to 6 months before I got out. Right. And then I was recovering from an injury. I stepped into the gym. I was like, oh, they're doing combatives. I'm going to go say hi to the instructor. And then I realized it was a jiu-jitsu class. And I was like, oh, okay. Remember, like, I have wrestling background, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. Sure, I'll step in, and got humbled right away, got demolished by some brown belt. And I was completely blown away. And I was like, sign me up. I'm here the next day. And I have not stopped.
Right.
And it's just been amazing journey. Lots of highs, some lows, but lessons every single day.
So I'm just gonna explain this before we get into it, because I've had a lot of practitioners here, hobbyists. We have our head BJJ coach here, Jerry, and then Shane. And you get a lot of lessons, but a lot of them, like say from like a regular practitioner like me, right?
Sure.
It's kind of like the same advice almost, right? It's almost cliche. It's like, it's almost like predicted that I know what they're going to say. Not that you can't get value out of that, because everyone's different and you can learn from, just every individual.
Yeah.
But then it's almost like, how do you get good consistency? Of course, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. Yeah. So we're going to talk about, like what you know from your level. I talked about this with Jerry, our head BJJ coach, about Jerry can explain a lot of things, right? Like from doing it from all these years. Yeah. But people like me that's been doing it for 5-6 years don't really quite understand, because he's doing it for like, I don't know, however long, like 2 decades or something like that. And I can kind of filter in what he's saying.
Sure.
But for me, I'm kind of a deep thinker when it comes down to that. It's like, I don't really know what he's saying, right? Because he has so much experience, and so do you. And that's what we're going to get into, that it's kind of like, can you go further in explaining what it takes to be at that level and maybe compete at that level? And then when you're going against someone at that level, maybe give us some tips and tricks, so that people can like kind of visualize and just kind of get an understanding of what it is to be doing it for all these years and that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at the end of the day, I can only speak for myself in what my level is. Yeah. So I've only been a black belt for just over a year, to be honest with you. But given my life experience and the way that I view life is slightly different in that sense, where I don't always focus on going 100 miles an hour. I focus on the concepts and the lessons to be taken from that and how it's translatable. So when I break down a technique, for example, or I talk about an approach. This is something that I picked up from my original instructor, Sonny Nahara, when I trained with him before we ended up merging with Cobra Kai. He came up from Cobra Kai too, so it was kind of like a full circle deal. But he used to say that when there's a move being demonstrated, he's like, you want to focus on something at one time. And then like no one ever shows a move just one time and they're like, okay, go drill it, right? So like if Jerry pulls people aside and then he's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this pass from here to here. And then he'll show it again, focusing on another detail, shows again, focusing on another detail. And every time he's doing that, you should be looking at a different aspect of that move. Because as a whole, as an entity, it's a lot. But if you break it down, I think that can facilitate you with a little bit of a more checkpoints to address during your technique. So then that way, it'll be easier to process. So,
right. Yeah. So you're talking about more like the intellect instead of like the physical aspect of it, right? Like you want to break things down.
Yeah.
And can you go deeper into that a little bit? Like, okay, so we'll drill every time. What do you think at that level, right, of your understanding, people get wrong when they're drilling?
I think they focus on, depending on what stage you're on. If you're brand new, you're going to focus on just trying to like muscle your way through if you're a guy.
Yeah, sure.
If you're a female, you're going to be very timid. It's typically what I've found. Now, if you have been doing it for a couple of years,
say you're like your level.
Yeah. So as a black belt,
sure.
For me, like, so a little bit of insight on me is I got my black belt from Go, which is pretty much the head instructor at Cobra Kai that gave everyone their black belt that I pretty much predominantly train with. It was Jerry, Shane, Dave, Josh, Rich. I used to train with a lot too. So for me, it's when I came over to Syndicate to train with Jerry and Shane, I've had a massive growth in my own skill and knowledge because of their program, their exposure and everything. But I am not afraid to make mistakes. Like, you know, I take the pride out of it, right? It's a learning process for me. So it's like, you submitted me like 30 times. That's great. But I'm literally focusing on this one aspect. So it's okay. You know, I was just telling another teammate earlier today, I'm like, you either are going to commit to working on this or you're going to half-ass it and not commit to either one, or you're just not going to get better. So you got to let that fear go. I mean, that's the place to experiment. That's the place to have fun. That's the place to learn. Better there than out in the street or out in a competition, you know? So for me, I that's what I focused on. I focused on what I wanted to work on initially was the leg locks. So I focused on leg locks for a good 6 months. Like I would give up positions, I would lose positions, I would get frustrated, but it's at the end of the day, it's like, that's just my main focus. But I have a whole nother aspect behind my game.
Sure. Is it effortless for you to put that ego aside? Or do you are you still fighting with it like here and there?
It's not effortless, but it's also not a fight. At this point, it's more of an acceptance. Like I know that if I want to get better, things are going to occur that may not always seem positive right away, right? So like people who are successful in life, everyone around them only sees their success, but only the close people see their hard work to that success, right? So it's the same thing. If you're trying to learn something in the realm of grappling and you feel like everyone's beating you up or you're losing position or you're losing the technique because you're focusing on something else, it's like, well, that doesn't matter. That's not the priority, right? That's not your focus. So, but when you got it down, now you're going to bring everything together and then you're unstoppable, man. Everyone's like, where did this person come from? Like, who is this person? You know what I mean?
Kind of like chaining everything together from what you learned from like 6 months of doing leg locks and then translating it.
Yeah. And now it's like, oh, now that I feel very, very comfortable for this leg lock aspect, now I'm going to turn around and I'm going to show you like what my mount game looks like. My mount games. And then they're like, oh, whoa, where does mount game come from? Where do these takedowns come from? Where did this come from? Like, we thought that person was just like not very good in these positions. Like, no, that's not true at all. I was just focusing on something else.
I saw you, I was looking from the sidelines, right? And then there's, there's some people that come in the gym, right?
Sure.
You know, and they're a little aggressive. But then I kind of saw you go ham, not like in a bad way, but then it was like you were competing and it was a great sight to see.
Sure.
Like the intensity of it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's cool. Because far too often we see a, role here and there. We all know each other, right? And then we're all like very, courteous to each other.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
then it's fun just to see like when that happens at the gym. I didn't see too much of it. Like obviously we had a roll, but then when you guys were standing up, dude, it was like two bears like going at it.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't.
Was this last week?
Yeah. I was like, dude, they're like going pretty ham. Like I said, it's like a polar bear and a brown bear like going fucking ham. I'm like, dude, that's like a sight to see. You know what I mean?
I learned early on because of the gyms that I was in and the training partners that I had, I never really got to go 100%. You know, and that used to hinder me in competitions because I wasn't used to exerting 100% of my energy and strength. So when I was going against guys my size, like I would be getting tossed around a little bit and I'd be like, I can't hold the position. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And I would struggle. It was a big struggling transition from competing to training for me early on. But now, you know, in this gym, we have a little bit more space. We have a little bit of bigger guys. And sometimes I will match pace depending on who's coming out. And like wanting to, you know, raise the stakes a little bit because I like to, like I said, I like to have fun. I like to drill, but there are times where like I'm also been trying to push my wrestling a little bit more lately. So that's been my last focus, right? I did 6 months of leg locks. Now I'm doing 6 months of wrestling.
It's like your motivation.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I'm like, so if I have somebody who's willing to stand with me and wanting to go toe to toe and we weigh about the same, like I'm going to really push the pace because I want to see I want to get a quick gauge of what do I need to continue to work on when I go with smaller opponents. Like, okay, you know, because I'm not moving and tossing them around. I'm just kind of working my technique. So when I have somebody my size, it's like, okay, now I got to put some oomph behind I got to put, you know, a little bit of power and a little bit of strength, and it takes more energy if I fail. So I got to be sharper with my technique and be ready to go.
Absolutely, man. And I like that because like I said, when we go to the gym, we're very courteous to each other and it's great, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, just like anything else, like say going off to another like sport, like say like striking or something.
Yeah.
Well, you got to have, you can flow and obviously, right? Because you don't want to get like CT or anything and go hard, but you have to get like a reality check of what you can do, right? Yeah. So not to say that you should go hard and go ham, you know what I mean? But I think you have to pick up the intensity, especially even if you're striking and you know you get I dare I say hurt a little bit, right?
Sure.
Because you don't want to get a false sense of like when you're competing or even out in the street, like, I'm pretty good. And then all of a sudden, like this guy that has shitty technique just murks you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a fine line. And that's why like I've always encouraged competitions for individuals that are more like on the hobbyist side, you know, that are kind of just like, we'll do it like casually and whatnot. I still always preach competition, just like the people that want to be competitors. I still, hey, like competition is the way to go. Not because like you should go out there and, you know, have this whole ego pride thing, but because it's like, there is no better gauge. There's weight classes, there's age restrictions, there's all these things and parameters to try to implement like the most condensed individuals in that division so that everyone's kind of similar to all the parameters so that you can test out those skills, you know?
Yeah, competition is like animalistic, right? Like the intensity, it's somewhat, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's
like,
just feel testosterone.
Yeah, I mean, it's just people hype themselves. Like in competition, you kind of have to hype yourself up. Like I'm gonna, you know, some people are like,
you gotta believe
this
it.
motherfucker.
You gotta believe in yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you know you're getting like, oh yeah, you're like creating all this stuff to like motivate you to get the upper hand. Like you know, so some people, which is true. Like if you're going into a fight, it's like, yeah, I gotta feed my family, right? Like that's one thing that like motivates people, and then the other thing is like, yeah, no one believes in me, so they take it out on like the competition.
Yeah,
which is funny. So getting back into, say, like if you go with like another person at your level, like a black belt, right? Yeah. What is like going back to like the ego thing, how is it different from like say rolling with like a brown belt, right?
Sure.
And then you're going black belt. And then here's another kicker. Like he's kind of going ham. He's put that intensity level up. Like what does it feel like to have that at that level? It's like you're going with it. You know what? Kind of like.
So I grew up in the era where like Dragon Ball Z was a really big thing, right?
Sure.
And so like every time we have these like live training sessions or sparring, whatever you want to call them, I kind of like put myself in that mode where it's like Goku only goes like 2% initially in a fight, and then he just gets stronger and stronger as like the fight goes on.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like think about that too when I'm training. Like, it's like, I'm going to match the person's pace. That's my entire goal. It's like, if the person comes out at 100%, it's like, okay, I'm not going to go 100 with you because I know what I'm capable of doing at 100. So I'm going to, normally, I don't even go past 55. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's like, I'm going to start off at 75 now and then, you know, be ready to push the pace a little bit. And then every minute that goes along, I'm pushing the pace more and more and more and more. If you're coming out at 100, but you're not going to stay at 100 for 5, 6, 7 minutes. So it's usually I have a pretty good judge of that. Yeah. Now, if I'm going against another black belt, you know, we're just feeling each other out. We're going out and I don't know them. We're just kind of like having fun, moving around, seeing what kind of tricks we're trying to pull on each other just to have fun. And then kind of, again, we're both matching pace. So like if I start going hard, they're going to go hard too. And if they're going hard, I'm going to go hard too, you know? Yeah. So then it's like, you kind of have to be aware of that. And again, know what you're capable of. If you have terrible cardio, like you're not going to seek to push the pace at the first minute, you know? So you're going to be smart. You got to be strategic about it. But if you have an endless amount of cardio, like you're like, I don't care. We're just going to.
I would argue, dude, I would argue that, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. Like, I would argue that's the most important because that quote, I've said this like a million times, you know, people are going to hate me for this, but then it's exhaustion makes a coward out of all of us.
Yeah.
Right. If, like you were saying, if you don't know how to pace yourself, even if it's like stand up or jiu-jitsu, like all sports, basketball, right? Like you kind of have to thread. You're not running fucking full court down every play. I think that's kind of the same thing.
Well, everyone's strong at the beginning, right?
Sure.
Like, like if you're fresh, I don't care how much experience you have, you're gonna be the best version of yourself in that round in the first minute, maybe even the first 2. So really, the training doesn't start till halfway through the round.
Right.
So it's like now we're gonna see who can endure this, right? And that's what wrestling's all about. That's why wrestling's one of the hardest sports in the world, if not the hardest. It's because you fight for every position at the entire match. Like you want your thumb inside, you're fighting for that. You want your hand inside, you're fighting for that. You want head position, you're fighting for that. Like jiu-jitsu is a little more relaxed in that way, where it's a lot of, now I always say like I'm a very lazy practitioner, because it's not that so much that I'm not disciplined or lazy. It's just that I focus a lot on taking the path of least resistance. I've gotten to that point where it's like I know enough techniques and I know enough moves and variations of stuff that if I give up this, I know that I'm going to feel resistance here, but I can easily go to the other side. So then it's like, I'm going to go to the other side. Yeah. And then that also gives me a really good judge of that person's skill. Like their inability to be able to perform the exact same stuff to the other side is a huge advantage to me, which is why I always preach to every practitioner.
Drill both sides.
Drill both sides. Like, no.
Yeah. Which no one likes to do, by the way.
No, absolutely not. Because we all favor a side, right?
Absolutely.
Like people want to be the best that they are at what they already know how to do.
Because they're comfortable, right?
Right, because you're comfortable, right? Because it's less effort.
Yeah,
you know. But
exactly.
it's like, oh, I already invested so much time and effort on learning this over here. Like, why do I want to start over? Well, it's like, because that's how you get better overall, right?
Yeah, and that's a good distinguishing aspect of like a comparison between like wrestling and jiu-jitsu. I think it's cliche now to say in jiu-jitsu, but what do they say? It's like the art of the subtle. What the fuck is it? It's like the soft art or something like that, or the gentle.
Yeah,
the gentle art of you know. And there's something to that.
Yeah,
but kind of not really. Like it's kind of like a double-edged sword because, like you know, if you're competing against like the highest of the high, and if you train MMA with that, the intensity is there. But then for the most part, I think jiu-jitsu has gotten like culturally wise, it's kind of like, oh yeah, like you were saying, kind of take your time on these drills and then see the moves within the moves and you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was thinking about like the practicality, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll have some gyms where it's like, you're all about that. And then going back to what I was saying, well, fuck, if you get into like a real life, you know, situation or you haven't competed and then you feel someone's heavy pressure, they've been only doing it for 6 months and he's like a collegiate wrestler, then that ego must be a shot because you've been training for like 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can tell you firsthand experience how it's been for me, like knowing that, you know, I've been, let's say for example, there's a few stories, so I'm trying to figure out which one to tell you. Like
Oh, go
Okay,
ahead.
so
Go ahead.
I was probably, I want to say maybe like a blue belt, somewhat like probably like in my second year of blue belt, and we had a black belt come and visit. Ryan Hall, he was giving a seminar.
Oh, cool.
He was here for like the UFC Ultimate Fighter thing,
Yeah.
and he popped in the gym one day, and we threw on the gi, and man, I was like, I'm a good wrestler. Like I've been doing jiu-jitsu. Like I gotta like at least. Like I felt very comfortable taking people down,
Yep.
So I was like, I got to be able to at least like get something on him. And man, he just shut down everything I was throwing at him.
You're talking about Ryan Hall.
Ryan Hall,
Sure,
yeah.
Okay.
And we're talking just straight stand up, like we were wrestling, and in the gi, and I couldn't take this guy down. It was like the craziest thing. And this is a huge mind blow. I'm like, I don't even think he has any wrestling background. I think he's just a jiu-jitsu guy. And I was like, what the heck is going on?
What do you think that is? Is it the balance? Like some people just have great balance. Some people just, I know he's been doing it for years. And don't get me wrong, he's just a badass jiu-jitsu practitioner. But what do you think it is? It's just hard to take him down? Like, what is it?
No, I think it was just experience more than anything, understanding the whole body mechanics to a higher degree. And it's the same thing like when I love challenges. So like if I know somebody's a judo guy and we're doing gi class, that's the first person I'm going to go spar with.
Nice.
Because you know what? Again, like I seek the knowledge. So I don't care about belt you are, and I don't care about, whatever power tier or structure tier or command tier or whatever you're on. Like the lessons can be learned from anybody, right? Like you're a white belt in jiu-jitsu, but this guy's a black belt in judo. So, dude, show me something. Let me see what you have. Let's spar, and I'm gonna firsthand experience how it feels, and then I'm gonna ask questions because I'm a student in that world. You know what I mean? So that's how I actually got into judo. It's like we had a judo black belt, and he was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. Well, I was a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, but I was a white belt in judo. So like we would trade off. We'd be like, hey man, like show me something, I'll show you something, man, I learned some cool stuff for sure.
Yeah, I bet, and that's like very refreshing to hear because I think a lot of people. Oh, okay. So I'll make the comparison of like, how people say, oh yeah, let go or do what's in your control.
Yeah.
Like the stoic kind of like, do what's in your control. And then it's gotten a little bit cliche and stuff like that. But then what you were saying about just like, what you're really saying is like, you always got to be like a student.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I agree with that. I think that's a lot of what I think that's the main thing that people take out of jiu-jitsu that they can apply in life, right? Because they're like, we're getting our bar, especially if you've been training for a while. And even with me, like a quote that I really like is like, you're never arrived, you're always becoming.
Yeah.
And that's just with life in general.
Right.
It's just kind of like, well, if you were to make, kind of going off the cuff here, but then if you were to make like $1 million, you know how long you're going to be happy for like 2 days?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you want like 10 million.
Yeah.
So that just means that it's not in the actual goal. It's just a direction.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to embrace like the uncertainty and the progress, right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Chris, because the reality is it's like, there's a difference between like not hitting your ultimate potential or your goal and finding some success along the way. But it's like every day should be an opportunity to get better and improve. Right. So like I tell people all the time, like, hey man, it's my first day in jiu-jitsu. Like every single day that I go to jiu-jitsu, and people laugh at me because they're like, we know you're lying. But it's like, no, man, like I'm coming in with like an open mind that like I might learn something new today. Or maybe I saw something that I planned on working out today and it's going to go like shit, but I'm going to practice it so that the following day it's going to be better. And that's what I do right now. Like I take my son to wrestling and they show all these amazing moves and concepts and breakdowns. And I'm paying attention, man. I'm watching and I'm learning. And then guess what? The next day I go train. I'm applying a lot of that stuff, even though I haven't physically drilled it. But it's just like, hey, a lot of this stuff is just conceptual and just being aware. So I know enough grappling to be able to make those changes on the spot to see how it's going, like make that gauge, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And that it feels great. Like
absolutely, man. I agree with you, man. And you know what I was thinking about there, like a light bulb click, because you know when you have those Instagram memes, and hey, man, I felt this way at one time when a wrestler would come in, right, and then like I said, you've been doing it for years,
Yeah, and they just
and then
dominate.
they're just like on top of you, and you can't get out, and you're like, dude, why am I doing this? Like it's crazy. And then the reason why I say I used to be like that, and then I transitioned, right, because you know after years of experience,
Yeah.
you're just kind of like, okay, whatever, but then. Okay, so they've been doing jujitsu for like 3 months, but then you could learn something off their pressure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you start having that mindset shift of like, well, I can learn from this guy, you know, because far too often we are, just a fun fact, we are people of like status, right? A lot of people do a lot of things for just the status itself.
Sure.
And that plays into it. It's almost like, well, I've been doing, like I was saying, I was like, well, I've been doing this shit for 5 years. You know, he shouldn't be able to murk me after 2 months of doing jiu-jitsu.
Right.
But let alone, like I said, he's a collegiate wrestler and then he's fucking you up on the ground in top pressure.
Yeah.
And then that leads into, you know, kind of like going back to your ego. It's like, dude, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah,
come
no,
on,
absolutely.
man. Right. And then all of a sudden, somewhere along the way, maybe 2-3 years, it took me a while, but then it's kind of like you can learn just what kind of pressure he's doing. You could do the same thing. You can put your arm here to reframe off, slow it down a little bit. You can learn a lot from this guy that's murking you, you know?
Yeah, that's what, and that exactly. Like you learn something from every single person, regardless of what their actual skill level is. You know, some of the dangerous people to train with sometimes are like brand new white belts that are coming in, or inexperienced people because they're just kind of a spaz or chaotic in nature. But sometimes, man, it's not so bad as long as you're aware, because you're gonna get a reaction that is completely unexpected, and then I'm gonna put that in my back pocket.
Yeah.
Put it in my toolbox, because I'm like, hey, if I ever see this again, I know exactly what to do. You know what I mean? Because it's like something random, like I wasn't used to seeing, or, you know, I've only seen it once before. So it's like, oh, okay, you know, whatever. But going back to what you're saying about, you know, just feeling a little hurt in the inside when you're like, I've been doing this for so long, and like it's not panning out how I wanted it to. Yeah, I get it, because again, I've had the same thing. I think I was a purple belt or brown belt, and we had like a D1 wrestler come through, and it was no gi. And at the time I was focusing more on gi. So like my no gi wasn't the best, but again, I always kind of felt comfortable in, you know, wrestling and grappling as a whole. So I was like, all right, whatever, you know? And, man, the guy was just like destroying me, like just taking me down left and right and making a misery out of me. But what I had in my favor was the fact that like I had enough guard retention to be able to, you know, get him off of me, put him in a position where it was a full threat. And then I would just be like, my pride and my ego did get the best of me. So I'd stand back up and be like, let him take me down again.
Yeah,
you know, and he would sure shit take me down again. But I've learned a lot of lessons off that experience, because now it's like when I see someone who's really good at something, I gravitate to them, and I want to learn everything about that thing that they're really good at.
Yeah, that like certain specifics.
Yeah.
Right?
So one of the biggest things that I loved about Cobra Kai when we ended up merging with them was the fact that we just had this whole versatility of higher belts, that everyone was good at something specifically. Like Dave was really good at butterfly guard. Shane was really good with like just overall pressure and aggressiveness of getting after it. Jerry was a very technical and very fast, very fluid. And then you had Sim, who obviously was a mesh of things, but in the gi, he would focus on like, you know, his shin to shin guard, his butterfly X guard. Then I had Sonny, who showed me a lot of spider guard, a lot of deep half, and a lot of like how to be very fluid and relaxed during the combat. Then we had another guy, Tyler, who was with us for a short period of time. And he used to tell me jiu-jitsu is the art of movement and not the art of moves. And that kind of always resonated with me, because once he broke it down and explained that if you know how to move your body into a position, you can learn any technique you want. But if you're incapable of moving into that position, it doesn't matter how much I show you if you can't even get there. So understanding that concept was like, oh, that's so true, which goes back to, I'm just focusing on this right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care about everything else, because that's not driving the overall goal, right? So it's like, once I connect that, then I can focus on another part of it and structure it and start creating these channels where they all start interconnecting. And then that's how you build your game. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Interestingly enough, that's great that you say that, because a lot of people, including myself sometimes, man, like we don't have that discipline to stick on one thing, right? Because like I was talking about it with, another guy that's in my level, you want to play your A game.
yeah.
Especially when you get into it, like, when you're rolling and then you're not thinking about it, you're in this like flow state and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then the intensity picks up, and then
That's that pride right there. That's
there it is. And doing that one move, quote unquote, that's getting thrown out the window because you guys are just going ham now. You know what I mean? And it's not every time, it's just one round, and then you could kind of get back into it. Right. Like if you go with a white belt, blue belt, whatever, and then you're just practicing deep hap if that's your goal.
Absolutely.
But fucking hell, like it's so fun, right?
Yeah.
Like it's that one thing where it's like, hey man, let's just like get to rolling.
Yeah.
Right? Like fuck these drills.
No, exactly, man. Like I'm telling you, I've had some hard lessons, man, because in our upbringing, we had a black belt, his name's Rodrigo, and he is one of the best half guard players I've ever experienced in this game. And I would purposely and intentionally step into that half guard every single time I rolled with him. Not because like I just wanted to get my ass kicked, but because I was like snapped picturing things that he was doing, and I was taking that away.
Yeah.
And then I would be like, okay, he's gonna go here and he's gonna do this. Okay. So the next day, he's gonna go here and he's gonna do this. And then what's gonna happen next? And then it's like I just kept building and building and building. And then I would reverse it. I would put myself in a position where I was playing bottom half and he was playing top half, and to see what he was doing on the back end. So then I knew how to respond to him when I was on the top. So it's like I was literally putting myself in these positions that were so uncomfortable, knowing that I'm going to lose for the learning process.
Yeah.
And then now it's like I stepped into anybody's half guard and I'm like, this is like trash, like nowhere near what I'm used to having. And I just like walk right through it.
Right.
And then the same thing. It's like I'll put people in my half guard and it's like they're just stuck there.
Yeah.
That's just misery.
You know what? This is why I enjoy doing these like podcasts and stuff like that. I mean, going back to the principle of just learning and stuff, you could always learn from everyone, right? Everyone. Sure. And what I'm getting off of this, interestingly enough, is that funny when you start your jiu-jitsu journey first, you tend to go at like a high pace. You want to learn everything. The growth is exponential because you don't know shit.
Of course.
And funny thing enough, with the things that you're saying, you just learn to slow it down. And I talked to Jerry about that like last, when I had him out here. Now, when I do things, it's the same things that's going along the lines of what you're saying. It's like I'm seeing just different. So what I mean is just I'm seeing specifics, not like submissions. It's just like if they try to hug your head, right? I'll cuff them with a C grip and then just keep their shoulder away. Even just that subtle thing.
Preventative.
It's such a game changer. Now you see the guy, for the people that are on camera, they're struggling like a fucking fish, like trying to hug you and get over-unders on you. Yeah. It's like a subtle thing, but it makes the fucking match. Like, it's like, what the fuck? And the other thing is that, the slowing down kind of thing, you see just what I explained, it's like, oh, he's going to put his arm there. It's like you're literally in like the Matrix. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're just kind of like, and then you're transitioning even when you're moving fast, like the knee on belly, and then you're going to the other side on spinning, his back. Yeah. It's like in slow-mo. Yeah. It's like,
yeah. And it's so true, man. I remember being a blue belt and it got to the point where I was doing like 2-a-days and I was lifting and I was conditioning. And I was like, I'm going to be unstoppable. Before I was only training like once a day. Every other day or, whatever. And I was like, now I'm doubling it. Like I'm bound to get that much better. And what I found is I'm at a high risk for injury, first of all, because I'm not letting my body recover. And two, it's like, I really wasn't getting that much better because you will plateau at every stage of your game, right? You will plateau if you don't know how to approach your training sessions. And that's what I learned from one of my mentors was the fact that it's like you need to start focusing independently and individually on certain aspects of the game. And so that, here I am, like how many years later, like that's what I'm preaching is because if you are trying to learn all the things all at once, it's like you're only really going to learn like the surface area of that concept.
Yeah.
But if you really dive into the one position, you're like, at least I spent enough time on it to really kind of get a good understanding before I move on, and so on and so forth. And you'll be surprised how many times you end up circling back because you're trying to add on more to that one area again,
yep.
right? So it's like this endless circle that you're doing that you're just, it's like a spiral. So there's a little tiny spiral, and then it goes bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just gets massively huge.
Right.
But it's because you've gone around the loop so many times in all the different positions and techniques and moves that you've just added on every little aspect to that position.
Yeah.
So for me, tying back into, like when someone demonstrates a move, like you should be looking at certain aspects of that move, right? So for example, Jerry's showing the knee cut position. So essentially, what are we achieving? Passing the guard. So we're going from point A to point B, right? That should be your main number one focus. Cool. I got it. Now I know which direction I'm traveling. Then second, it's like, where are his hands and feet? So the second time that the move is demonstrated, I'm focusing on hands and feet. So it's, I know I'm going from point A to point B, but now I got to know which way I'm turning, right? I'm going left or I'm going right. Putting my right hand goes here, left hand goes here,
Yep.
right foot, left foot, right? Third time the move is shown, I already know the other two parts. So now I'm focusing on where his hips and heads are being put. So then it's like, bam. So then now when I'm going to drill the move, I'm going to make all those checkpoints. I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to go from point A to point B. My hands are here. My feet are here. My hips are here. My head's here. Now to the next snapshot, I'm going here. Bam. And then the third, bam. And then every step of that is a checkpoint that I should be arriving to my end game, passing the guard, right? So I went from point A to point B. And then let's say we drill that for a week. Okay. And then we don't touch bases on it again till, I don't know, 3 months on the road, 4 months on the road. And it's like, oh yeah, man, I totally forgot that I was supposed to do this with my head. No wonder like I was having a little bit of trouble with that. I'm just refreshing. And then I'm looking to see, is there maybe something else that I could be doing? Maybe like a different variation, maybe a different angle. Like, all right, well, I drilled it all to one side before. Maybe I should drill it to the other side now. You know what I mean? Because I have a pretty good understanding on this side. So like, you are the limitations of your ability to learn and grow. Like you are the limitations to your own success, right? You just have to be aware enough and disciplined enough to put in the work.
Right. And with that, what I got out of that is that, man, for people, I think you have to go through that kind of like, well, this is obvious, but then you have to go through that struggle to figure that out, right?
Absolutely.
To slow things down.
Yes.
Because what I got out of that is that straight experience. Because when the way you were talking, to slow things down, you have to have pick things up and know that
They were
it's
wrong.
like, oh, that can't be like sustainable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
For your like jiu-jitsu journey and how you're going to learn. Even
Right.
just learning itself.
Right.
Not even like talking about jiu-jitsu. Like if you want to learn and understand, that's the key word,
Yeah.
is understand,
Right.
not just memorize, but
Correct.
understand.
Yeah.
You have to slow things down, but in order to do that, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you think of things, you have to go through the motions of being like, okay, well, I don't know how sustainable my aggressiveness and going 2-a-days and not recovering my body is.
Right.
You're just kind of like, all right, well,
Right.
fucking like now I'm just on autopilot.
Yeah, like you're bound to continue to, obviously get better than the person that only trains once a week. But the reality is it's like if you're just going through the motions, like you're not really conceptually learning anything new, right? So when we start to teach, that's when we really, really learn like what our skills and knowledge is.
Sure.
So then it's like, that's why in my eyes, it should take more than 3 or 4 years to get your black belt. Not because of the technique,
Yeah.
not because of what you're capable of doing or how well you're competing or any of that. It's because I feel like when you get to a black belt level, you should have a certain degree of maturity and understanding and knowing how to also teach others. Like that's the whole principle behind it. It's like you want to be able to share this journey with other people, but if you don't know how to teach a simple armbar because you only know how to do it, you don't know how to kind of articulate it a little bit or conceptually break it down for someone, then how are you planning on sharing that process and journey with them?
Right. Interestingly enough, I'm going to put in a quote. There's this world-class physicist. His name's Robert Feynman. He quotes, if you want to master something, teach it.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because the thing is that you're connecting the dots in your brain.
Yes.
Right. Like as we're talking right now, I'm connecting fucking dots in my brain. You know what I mean? That's why I have this big thing. Like my saying is like light bulb moments.
Yeah.
Every time I talk to someone, because it's like, oh, that's interesting. Even if it's like same perspectives,
Yeah.
it's like a different pathway to it.
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean,
with everyone.
there's 100 ways to skin a cat.
Yeah, right.
So it's like,
yeah, that's a great one.
You know what
That's
I mean?
a good one.
And
yeah.
it's like, yeah, you know how to do a knee cut. I know how to do a knee cut. Jerry knows how to do a knee cut, and everyone else knows how to do a knee cut. But then it's like, what is so unique about the way that you do it? Maybe it's your body type. Maybe it's your injury. Maybe it's your mobility, your flexibility, anything, right? That makes it slightly more unique. But conceptually, there's going to be certain principles that cannot waver, right? So like, in order to do a proper knee cut, you need to have your elbow inside of the knee shield.
Mm-hmm.
Without it, I don't care what you do, you won't achieve that goal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so you have the foundation, you have the principle,
the
base of it, the concept, but then you have the uniqueness. And that's what's so great about jiu-jitsu is like, there's so many variations of the same thing. And you have to kind of learn and adjust. And the more you know, the better it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like one move might work on you because of your size and my size and our differences. Whereas I might not be able to manhandle somebody my size as easily as I can manhandle you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like,
yeah, a few things on that. Man, that's really good. Like you said, there's the base foundations, and that's with everything else too. Like say boxing, right? Or Muay Thai or something.
Sure.
Well, you have to move your hip, first. Like you can't just throw it. You have to do certain foundations, then you could kind of make it your own, right? Like kind of like Unica, there's certain principles that you have to do. Otherwise, your technique's probably just shit because of like the ground up basis, right? I think that's very fascinating. And then it's just the like little specific details, like you said, that was a good one. Like 100 ways or 1,000 ways to skin a cat, because people do shit differently. Yeah. I love martial arts just in general, especially jiu-jitsu, because it's a self-expression of yourself.
Okay.
People have a different game. Yeah. You know what I mean? Sure. Like even if you were, this is along relating to what you said, even if we played, me and you, the same exact game, just on our mere genetics, our body type, the way we fucking look, I guess, you know what I mean? Or the way we do things, we can copy each other. It ain't going to be the same. Right. We're going to figure out different things, right? We could learn the same moves and then just completely have different, like it's unrecognizable, like even though we're learning the same things.
Right.
And that's what I love about it. Certain nuances. That's the same thing with striking. We can learn the same thing, but I stand different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'll kind of move different, even if we learn the same things. So that's why I say it's like a self-expression kind of thing, because you kind of make it your own. Yeah. It's like customized to you, kind of like playing a video game.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's why we refer to a lot of like your A game, your B game, your C game, right? Like your game, right? That's specific to you. But again, that's why I also don the responsibility to you that your own success and your ability to grow in your games is your responsibility. Yes. Like you should be, humble enough, disciplined enough to understand that like I can't learn everything all at once. So it's like I need to break it down, learn this part right now. This is what we're focused on, make that a priority, and then move on to the next stage of the process and continue that process all the way around the circle.
Right. Yeah, that's really, really good. So before we kind of end this, we're near an hour. So at your level, going back, because I guess that's the main topic here, is that what tips would you have for like other black belts, right? Because like we said, we're in a different like kind of level. So from black belt to like black belt, or years of experience to years of experience, what would you say to another black belt? Of course, it's your subjective opinion. Sure. Give us a tip. Give them like a tip, and obviously it might be vice versa that they'll give you a tip, but obviously you're here, so right. What tips would you have, man?
Oh, of course. So, man, honestly, I hate to sound cliche at all, but it really just starts over.
Yep.
Like because if you wanted to say that a lower belt was chasing the series of colors to get to that black belt, it's like, okay, great, you achieved it. So what now? What other belt are you seeking? Because any other belt outside of that is just time. You know what I mean? So it's like, if that's your goal, you're off to a bad start. So even getting to the black belt, it's like, okay, I put in all this work. It's just about refinement. you're trying to again be the best version and make your jiu-jitsu at this point, right? That's what we're discussing.
Yeah.
You want to make that as effortless as possible, as sharp as possible, right? As crisp and beautiful and knowledgeable and conceptual as possible. Like it should be like a lazy approach, right? Where it's like it doesn't take a lot of effort for me to just move out of the way and take your back. You know what I mean? Obviously, if you're competing against people at your level, it's going to be a struggle no matter what. Yeah. So you got to put in that.
I'm joking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But the concept is the same though. Like as a lower belt, you should be seeking the same thing. To be honest with you, because that's why again I'm just taking every day as a new day to learn something new. You know what I mean? And continue to build on that.
Yeah. What we didn't go over, interestingly enough, and again another light bulb moment is that a lot of reasons why people practice jiu-jitsu is what's going on at home. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's kind of like their avenue.
Their outlet.
So a lot of that does play into your game, like because how emotional you are, maybe, right?
Yeah.
If you're a younger guy, maybe like you have fucking parents at home that are fucking throwing plates at each other. You know what I mean? Like it's just, and then you get there, you have all this aggression, and unfortunately, like maybe if you're you have an abusive home, it's kind of like you take that to the gym, right? So it's kind of like everyone has their own experience, and it's kind of subjective to like how they train and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like I can probably count on one hand how much jiu-jitsu has saved my life personally. But I agree with you. There are days where you're having a rough week or you're having a rough day or whatever, and you just go there and that's your outlet. Yeah. That's your therapy. That's your session. But at the end of the day, like you got to remember that just because they're having a shit day, not everybody else is too. That somebody else could be having the best day of their life because, they got a race, they got a promotion, they graduated, whatever positive things going on in their lives. It's all about perspective there, right? So if I go in and I'm like, I'm having a terrible day and I'm going to go out there, I'm going to go hard, and I hurt somebody, now I'm going to feel like shit, right? Because they were having the best day of their lives, and now I accidentally popped their knee, and now they can't walk, and now their shit's going to be, then now they're having the shittiest day of their life. You know what I mean? So awareness, right? Tying back that to that, it's okay to be like, it's okay to have all that feeling and experience and be going through that, and get a good fight and get a good sweat. But at the end of the day, like you're not there to hurt anybody, man. If that's your goal, then you're going to get hurt back too. Because again, people are going to match your pace. You go 100, they're going to go 100, and now what? Now somebody's swinging, and it's just a dangerous thing to be at. It, if you're having a hard time, man, pull somebody aside and be like, hey, man, like let's get a good session in today, but I'm having a little bit of a rough day. And not only are you going to get a good session, but you're also going to build a bigger bond and camaraderie with your teammates because who knows? Maybe they are having a rough day too, man, and they just want to talk to somebody about it. Maybe you guys can go hang out and have lunch together or something and just decompress a little bit too.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do, especially as a male, is talk about your feelings. But man, we're all human, man.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And man, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all there to just learn, right?
Yeah.
That's really what we're there for. We're here to build a community, which we do have at Syndicate MMA. And man, I just appreciate everyone over there. And even with this podcast, man, I appreciate you, man, because I've learned a lot of like nuggets, I guess you could say, quote unquote, in here. And my mind is just blown from what I've learned just from this podcast. And I'm being like completely genuine and honest about that.
Awesome, man. I love it. Appreciate it.
And thank you for your time, man. And dude, this was a banger, dude.
Awesome.
Let's
Thank
go.
you. I appreciate it.
All right.